We are good. We have 17 people with us. We had about 30 people sign up, so we look forward to others joining along the way. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to this session of Black Men Organizing, the State of Black Milwaukee. And okay, good. Thank you, Angela. My name is Walter Lanier. Most of you all know me, pastor of the Progressive Baptist Church of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, formerly the president and CEO of the African American Leadership Alliance Milwaukee. Just recently stepped down, had a great 2.5 years, and looking forward to what the future holds. That organization is in good hands and doing really well. And I'm looking forward to what the future holds for me and for all of us as we continue to work together more collectively and effectively. We are here this evening around MPS, Milwaukee Public Schools. A lot of challenges, issues, articles, things going on with Milwaukee. Everybody knows you're here to learn more about it. Today is really a 101. It's part one. It's for us to get a clear understanding of MPS, how it moves, how it works, how we can have impact, how we can participate. And we are glad to have here with us 4 panelists. Darryl Jackson is with us. He is a current MPS board member. Just put your hand in the air, Darryl. I'm sure they know who you are. We're glad to have him here with us. We also have Aisha Carr, our former MPS school board member, recently stepped down within the past month or two. And also we have Angela Harris, the MPS Black Educator and Abolitionist and part of the Black Educators Caucus, and Baba Derek Rogers, who is also an educator here. Sister Carr, recently there was a news article that came out regarding some charges that have been raised against her. She was not caught by surprise. Relative to that, I don't want to either diminish the significance of that or exaggerate the fact of those charges that were filed. We will let the legal system work that out on its own. We as a community have never let the system dictate who speaks for us or with us in the past, and we won't do that in the present either. So we'll just let that process play itself out. We know what the system is and how it can work and how it cannot work. I also want to mention, not on the panel before we get started, Brother Darryl Williams. Brother Darryl and Williams and Jackson have been part of our Black Men Organizing. I'll call it a movement for now. Brother Darryl Williams, Dr. Williams, is also a finalist for the interim position. And so I just wanted to lift that up as well. We lastly, last summer, right around this time, a small group of brothers got together and talked about how can we be more effectively organized. We know that many of our ancestors, from Dr. King to Malcolm X to Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, have said in one way or another that we are not outnumbered, but that we are out-organized, And so what we said we would do when we began to do a year ago is how can we effectively mobilize Black men? Not starting something new, not building a new organization or project because we have so many, but rather how can we build on what's preceded us? How can we connect what already exists, be more effective and more organized as Black men in support of our community, supporting one another? And so that's borne a lot of fruit over a year. We're up around 400 or 500 men so far. We're focused on building community with one another, building relationships, reconciling relationships. We're also focused on how do we organize for power, recognizing that organizing is a thing, it's a principle, it's not just a word we say. There are processes and steps and procedures to organize effectively. And last but not least, how can we organize for action so that we're not just talking and fellowshipping, but that we are taking some steps and some actions. At the back end of that, I'll talk a little bit more about this and how you can participate, but I wanted to give you that backdrop. That brings us forward to today, because one of the things the brothers have talked about that are really, really important is youth and education, and clearly the most important institution with the most significant impact on youth and education in our city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that we all love and seek to rise and raise up is Milwaukee Public Schools. And we all know where we are controversially now. And so the goal here is to raise awareness, to heighten education, to answer some questions and then build off this into a next session. So I am going to fade to black, as we say. I'm going to put you into the hands of Baba Derek Rogers. He is going to cue up the lineup, and we will continue to move forward. Again, you have the ability either in the chat or the Q&A to ask questions or make comments. Please do that. Err on the side of more than less, because we'll also use that to capture information. Whatever we can't answer or respond to, we'll respond to later. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being together in the mix, and we will get ready to go into it.
Thank you, Pastor. Truly appreciate being here in community, with community, and particularly with these individuals who we have as guests in this seminar today, this webinar today, because I happen to know all of them, based on, their brilliance, their audacity, courage under fire, definitely, and just their insurgency. And those aren't terms too often associated with Black educators in our community, unfortunately. And so, it's a blessing to know these individuals, to see what they continue to try to do. They represent what I consider to be another generation of individuals who are going forth and trying to do what they know should be done towards the best interests of particularly Black youth in our schools, and more specifically in our public schools. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. One of the first things that, or one of our goals of this particular forum is to get down to some nuts and bolts of, how do things like the school board work? What is the union's relationship to the school board, the administration? We have a lot of well-meaning people in community who oftentimes want to see things happen on behalf of Black children. They have expectations of some of these particular bodies, but we don't always know for sure how all this stuff works, what's possible. So we want to talk a little bit about processes, structure, governance, how things work. So we're going to actually start with Aisha, who's going to do two things for us. Going to talk a little bit about board governance structure, and then move into some of the nuts and bolts around how do proposals get moved and passed, and how does all that stuff work at the board level, so that we have a better understanding, we can be better informed on how we can support the good things for Black children. Aisha?
Good evening. Thank you, Baba. I'm sorry. Thank you, Derek Rogers. Thank you, Pastor Lanier. And good evening to all of the panelists and the members of the audience. For those of you that don't know, my name again is Aisha Carr. I am now a former board member who served 3 years on the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. I am really excited to be here tonight. I love the opportunity I'd love to take the opportunity to really shed some light on the vital role and responsibilities of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. So for those of you that don't know, MPS directors are really tasked with overseeing the education of our children and really ensuring that each student has access to quality and equitable educational outcomes in a supportive and equitable environment. And our responsibility is very broad and very impactful, with the goal of really touching every aspect of every educational experience that every student in our public system would have. And so first, our primary goal as elected officials is to be policymakers. We establish and enforce policies that really shape the district's educational standards, curriculum, and overall direction. And this really includes everything from setting academic goals to really ensuring the implementation of culturally relevant teaching practices. But I would also say equally important, we are the fiduciary agents of the public educational system that is supposed to, and I say that very loosely, but it's supposed to adhere to the concerns and the demands of Milwaukee constituents. And so fiscal oversight is another critical responsibility of the board, and we are to manage and allocate the district's budget, making sure that resources are distributed in a manner that addresses the needs of all students, and also particularly those in underserved communities. As the former District 4 school board director, my task was really to advocate for speaking to the underserved, but also those that are living in impoverished communities and those that lack the resources and the opportunities to thrive and to be equally as competitive to their peers who have the resources and the access to do so. And so, all of this involves making tough decisions to really balance our financial constraints with the imperative to provide a comprehensive, again, education for everyone. In addition to that, we are advocates for students and teachers and families. We work to create that bridge between our school district, MPS, and the community, really fostering open communication and collaboration. And this means like listening to the concerns of parents and educators and ensuring that their voices are heard in the decision-making process. And so we play a crucial role in hiring and evaluating the superintendent, as many of you are kind of watching that process unfold now. We were responsible for the day-to-day management of the district. And ultimately, it's our duty to ensure that the leadership at the highest level really aligns with our commitment to that educational excellence and equity. And I would say, just kind of wrapping this up, and the board is really guided by the vision of creating an educational environment where every student, regardless of their background or the communities that they come from, really have the opportunities to succeed. And so this vision is particularly significant in a diverse city like Milwaukee, where addressing the racial and economic disparities in education is really paramount. And so as Black members, Black leaders in Milwaukee, we understand that there are unique challenges, of course, and opportunities that our community face. And it's really through collective efforts and commitment and advocacy that we can really continue to drive positive change and ensure that our schools and our students have everything they need to survive. And so I could kind of go on and on about this, but I also know that our district has really been facing a lot of criticism lately, and it's ultimately reflective of some of the challenges that we see in the city of Milwaukee. And so again, I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to really engaging in difficult but meaningful conversations that hopefully will drive for more meaningful and collective work and change. And so I'll stop there, Baba. And I'm trying to screen.
No, this is good, Aisha, and appreciate that, because that's the perfect laying the foundation in terms of the role. And also, I love the way you spoke to what should be the function of school board members who have the best interests of our children on behalf. So I also want, if Pastor Lanier is able to put that board governance structure up, we'll be able to look at that. But maybe you can talk about it a little bit when we talk about the branches of board governance. And here we go. I think it's about to come up on the screen now. But if you can just talk a little bit about how all of that works so people can see an overview of that framework.
Yeah, so once again, so the board serves as the fiduciary agents of the district, and that is also the elected body. And so the board is constructed of individuals representing, I think, 8 districts. Now I think it's 8 districts with 1 citywide member. And these individuals are elected by constituents in the city of Milwaukee, and they're responsible for serving 4 years. And so at the top of the hierarchy serves the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, and they ultimately determine, again, the fiduciary agents of the district determine what budgeting and policy making and practices are basically facilitated throughout the district. Under the school board of directors are two offices in particular, the Office of Accountability and Efficiency and the Office of Board Governance. The Office of Accountability and Efficiency is almost like our checks and balance office. And that office oversees audits. It oversees like accountability measures as it pertains to budgeting and policy practices. And we as school board directors or elected officials are to work directly with that office to make sure that we are adhering to the policies and practices that we put forth, and that also we are following our budgeting practices and making sure that they are equitable, equitably allocated, and followed in a legal and ethical manner. The Office of Board Governance, I'd like to say, and I know Darryl could probably agree with me, I'm sorry, Director Jackson could agree with me, but the Office of Board Governance really oversees the school board directors, and that is almost like our accountability partner. That is the office that really keeps school board directors in line and is supposed to really support us in ensuring that we are navigating this role and operating in an ethical or legal aspect or legally in a way that we won't basically get in trouble. This is the Office of Board Governance that has, I think, maybe like a staff, or supposed to have a staff of about 12 people. This office also serves as our support system that creates policies or that supports us with creating policies or that conducts research, and also serves as that bridge between elected officials and then the school district and the city of Milwaukee. Those offices fall directly under the school board of directors. Also under the school board of directors is the superintendent and his administration. And that's where things kind of get a little tricky, because the superintendent reports directly to the board of directors, just as the Office of Accountability and the Office of Board Governance. But then the superintendent has a cabinet of appointees that he works with. So for those of you that are familiar or aware of some of the roles of our school district, you have the superintendent and you may have a deputy superintendent, and you may have chief or regional officer. So you have a chief financial officer, you have a chief academic officer. Those individuals all make up the cabinet of the superintendent. And then from there, you have the school district and the roles, the schools, and our babies. And so that's essentially I would say the organizational structure of the board. The misconception is that school board directors oversee the entire district, meaning schools, principals, and everyone else. And that is actually not necessarily the truth. The school board oversees the superintendent that oversees the district. And so a lot of times when, for example, a school board director receives a complaint from a parent, according to policy, we are not to engage with that parent. We have to engage with the superintendent that then delegates responsibilities or identify the specific department or leader to address that issue. And then the superintendent reports back to the board, in addition to the Office of Accountability and Efficiency and the Office of Board Governance. So it's a very, I would say, convoluted, very complex process and structure, but it's also very important to know and understand that structure, because when you have an issue or when you have a complaint, it doesn't always go to the elected officials, the school board directors. A lot of times it goes to the principals, and if it's not handled on a school level, it may go to the administration building and student support services, which is the office that has a lot of individuals, a lot of professionals that specialize in different things, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if there's any questions. Let me pull up the Q&A, but I don't know if there's any questions as it pertains to that.
What we'll do first, Aisha, is, I'm sorry, apologize. What we'll do first is we'll go to Darryl first, and we'll get a chance to address some of the questions probably when we get into the panel portion.
Okay.
All right. Darryl Jackson,
Yes, sir.
good to have you, sir. And first of all, thank you, Aisha. That's some excellent information, and you made some critical distinctions that a lot of people aren't aware of. I really appreciate that, and I'm sure everyone else did. Brother Darryl, talk a little bit about that thing that we all always want to know about: money, funding, budget. Thank you, sir.
Yes, yes. So thank everybody for logging on and listening. Panelists as well. Appreciate this opportunity. So me coming in my first year was rough, not having access. So a lot of times when I've said I don't know, it's not because I don't know the information. I didn't have access to the information. One being finance. So for over a year, I've done my hardest to have meetings with, our CFO who recently stepped down, and it clearly you see it didn't happen, and this is why. So the questions that I was asking out the gate, and Aisha would tell you, was always concerning the money. Where is it coming from? What accounts do we have? What type of debt do we owe? Um, Different notes from the city, things of that nature, where the average person just don't know. In addition to budget, money going to the schools. So of course, every school, well, I'm not gonna say of course, so excuse me, all schools have their own budget, but for each director in your district, depending on the resources that schools may need, you also can advocate and add resources there as well with the overall school district budget. And that's what I was doing, working with Matt Chasen, who's over the Office of Efficiency and Accountability. Matt is, in my opinion, has been very upfront with me and having discussions about any disparity. So one being the issues of programming needs, understanding stats, understanding quantitative data, qualitative data, understanding just a gamut, because I had a whole gamut of questions. But breaking down the budget, the entire budget that we get this big blue binder of a $1.5 billion budget. You don't have any person that's giving you any training to look through this budget. You don't have any real hands-on anyone. It's just here it is, it's thrown in your lap and pretty much basically figure it out. We have a 2x2, which is 45. But overall, you pretty much figure it out on your own, or you try to partner with someone, myself with Aisha, and trying to figure it out, together. So, but the budget is very massive. It can be, as she said already, convoluted, because if not coming from a background of finance, which I did, understanding various accounts. And if you know anything, people hide money. And that's a lot of, in these spaces right now, as we're finding out, a lot of things were hidden under the general fund account. And just understanding why certain accounts have more. So like the construction fund, which was just recently, we recently passed, and the public really didn't understand how crucial and impactful that is to take care of the buildings, to take care of the maintenance, to take care of the operational needs. The construction budget needed to pass so our students will come back to school in a building at the very minimum is safe. It may not be to what the parents may want or need at the time, but we're able to pass all different standards. But that is huge. That is crucial. Having that big pot of money to take care of, let's say plumbing is an issue today, whatever it may be. But in addition to that, also just different programming that's under budget. And one that I'm very passionate about is the youth apprenticeship. Beforehand, it was never a part of the budget. Having this youth apprenticeship program for, I think, 40 students who participated in it to be involved in the trades, it was always grant funded. So now moving forward, before Posley resigned, it will now be a part of the budget. Programs like that, in my opinion, should never just be grant funded. It should be automatic. So that if we're talking about sustainability in the future and creating career pathways for our students, we should have something in place where we know for sure that it's guaranteed and not just based off of, if we hit our target number for these grants, qualifications, and things of that nature. Let's see what else.
Let me ask you this, Darryl.
Yes,
If I was to ask like a fundamental question that someone might ask, or I'll use an example. Someone in community, they would love to see $7.5 million invested in culturally responsive and African-centered education. And we want to know why 7.5 million can't just be invested in that right now, tomorrow. How does the board get in front of that? If it was possible, how would it happen? And if someone wanted to block that, how could it be blocked?
Well, I'm gonna start backwards. If it was to be blocked, clearly only one vote out of the remaining 8 on the board will win that vote. So my yes and them no's will cut me out the gate. But the first thing would be having a conversation with our CFO in addition to Office of Efficiency and Accountability. Understanding already right now what are our available funds. So beforehand, I knew at the time we had funds, I want to say a dollar amount of at least $135 million that were available. And now having that discussion, once again, the need of the program or, the concern that you just mentioned, not only how much it will cost, but the effectiveness of it as well. So to do the research, as Aisha said, Director Carr, former Director Carr would say, and having that conversation with our board governors to do the research part on that, which will take some time in itself. But I've never been the first to say what I can't do. I'm gonna always say, let me check first. So with that being said, it can definitely happen, but it'll be over time, no different than me now advocating and pushing for having Rufus King having their own sports facility to train in. So it can happen. It definitely can happen. But it's a process in itself. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Brother Darryl. I'm sure when we get to our panel portion, whether it be in the chat or elsewhere, may have some more questions around the financial element of Milwaukee Public Schools. So thank you. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Angela Harris. Angela is going to talk to us, give us some information on some good stuff, but one of her favorite subjects, which is the union.
Pastor Lanier, can you bring up that slide that has all the board members on there for me? Good evening, everybody. I'm Angela Harris. I am, like Baba, Derek Rogers said, I am the chairperson of Black Educators Caucus MKE. I'm also a second grade teacher at Milwaukee Academy of Chinese Language, as well as an MPS parent and a District 4 constituent that does not currently have representation. So when we talk about the union, I think that it's important to start with what happened before I became a teacher, which was Act 10. So prior to Act 10, anybody who became an employee of Milwaukee Public Schools was automatically a member of the union. After Act 10 happened, they no longer could basically require people to be union members upon hire. People have to sign up to be members of the union. And so union membership recruitment is very integral to the union continuing to be an entity and a force here in our city. So right now, presently, the union has about 6,000 members, 6,000 teacher members. I think that the total number of teachers in the district is roughly about a little over 8,000, 9,000, somewhere in there. And so when you think about that, that's more than half of the teachers. And that doesn't even include all of the other departments that they represent, but over half of the teachers are members of the union. And so now every year, the board through the district administration has to agree to have a collective bargaining agreement with the union, which basically means that they will meet on a monthly basis to discuss the meet and confer needs of the union. And so that is a platform of demands that the union comes up with based upon feedback from the membership, as well as kind of what they want to see the district working on. As well as that meet and confer, though, the union also has a PAC, which is a political action contribution network. So I am a member of the MTEA. A portion of my donation, a portion of my membership goes towards political advocacy contributions. And so when we look at this slide that's currently up right now with all of the school board directors on it, and we see the folks who are endorsed by the union, and we think of the power, right? The leverage that even simply saying, I have 6,000 members behind me who or on your next election cycle will not knock doors for you. You will not get these political contributions. That is a lever of power that the union has that the community does not, right? Because they're organized in a way that the community is not organized. We don't have an organized group of folks that is contributing money to campaigns to get people who we support to vote in a certain way, right? And so when we look at Director Carr and Director Jackson in particular, as well as I would think Director Garcia, also those non-union endorsed candidates, when they try to push resolutions or policy that's actually innovative or could affect change, there will often be interference from the union through the other board directors. And so to Director Jackson's point, right, he may be all in on $7.3 million for culturally responsive teaching. But if the union isn't all in for that and he brings it to the board, and the other directors on the board have heard from the union, this is not something that the teachers support, they are automatically going to vote that down and it will never see the light of day. Think about Director Carr's feasibility study, right? The community was very much in tune with, like, we want to see what's going to happen next with this. How is this going to move forward? And the board members that were represented by the union, because the union was given misinformation or false information about the feasibility study, didn't support it. And therefore, Director Carr was kind of left hanging out there on her own. The same thing with the resolution, right? So the Say Yes to MPS, political ads and all of those things was part of the MTA's PAC. So they raised funds, additional funds, so that they could flyer, door knock, all of these things to get the referendum passed. But now when we think about this idea, right, that the union sits down monthly with administration and talks about not only what their demands are, but also what's happening within the district, the likelihood of the union knowing that there was some sort of issue with DPI is probably very highly likely. And so it begins to make people question, who is the union actually working for? And it actually should also make the district question, how valuable is that partnership? Because is that partnership actually serving our students and staff effectively? Or is that partnership really just leveraging the power of the union to really support those teachers that are on their way out, right? So when we see the union show up at school board meetings, a lot of times it is around what I like to refer to as bread and butter, that paychecks, pensions, like, how do I get paid at the end of the day for doing this job? And a lot of those things that they're supporting are really for teachers that are in the top 1%, right? They are at the top of the salary schedule. They are getting ready to retire within the next 10 years. And when you think about teachers like myself who are in that mid career, probably between like 5 and 10 years, there's really no plan for us in the district after those folks get ready to retire. And so that is like just a really brief synopsis about the union and kind of how the union operates within the district as well as within the board. And I mean, I could get into even more deep details about how union executive leadership will actively text board members on the floor and tell them how to vote. So it's very, when there are power brokers involved, they're going to do everything in their power to continue to ensure that they continue to have that power. And so that is really what the union is doing at this point, is they are going to continue to make sure that they hold the power and they control the narrative in that boardroom, because they know that that's where the decisions make that are going to benefit them.
That's powerful. Thank you, Angela. You know, a lot of people, I'm just thinking of, a lot of words. There were some words that you utilized there: power and leverage. And, for so many people in our community to not have an understanding of the complexity of this triad of entities: union, board, administration. This is clearly the type of knowledge that we have to have a better understanding of to inform the way we move on behalf of Black children throughout this community. And I'll just say this too, just real quickly, even before we move in the panel, for anyone listening to these individuals, and this is my own little addition to this, it should be pretty clear that a critically conscious and highly knowledgeable and insurgent, educator is one of the most dangerous beings to the existence of any wicked institution or system. And that's what you have here, the people speaking right now. So allow that to be the context of a lot of the things that you hear, whether it be in the media, in the neighborhoods or around education, because these are the people fighting, for Black children. So I just wanted to do that little commercial because it does mean a lot to me. So we are going to move into the other portion of our webinar tonight, which is a panel discussion. We are going to be opening it up to some questions that I think Pastor Lanier is going to be able to make available in the chat so that I would be able to ask our panelists. And what I'll do is I'll start with a couple that I do have that were submitted beforehand, and I'll pretty much open this first one up to. I'll actually open this first one up to Aisha. Can you hear me, Aisha?
Yes.
Okay, good. First panel question for our three wonderful panelists. It's reported that whomever is appointed as an interim superintendent would occupy that seat until July of next year, of 2025. I think that's the way it was reported, an interim, at least under that title. What do you feel could occur during that person's tenure, whoever that is, that could really be beneficial for public school children and families? So we got a whole year there with someone who's an interim. They're not the permanent person, the appointed person, but if most optimal conditions, what could happen?
I think the first things, so I'll start by saying this. My remarks relative to the previous superintendent is factual. It has been my firsthand experience, and it has been what has been shared with me through various forms of feedback provided from parents, from school leaders, and so on and so forth. So I'll start by saying that. To answer the question, in the next year or so, the next superintendent interim is going to first have to acknowledge truthfully, courageously, where we are as a district. I understand that sometimes accountability feels like a tax. I understand that sometimes it is difficult to admit that we have failed in so many ways. I also understand that whoever the new interim may be will be inheriting a mess in more blatant layman terms. And so I think the first thing is acknowledging truthfully and courageously. And I put emphasis on the courageous aspect because we're not in a good position. And the accountability has to be within the district and its current and previous leaders. And in order for us as a community to start the healing process and to understand that we need to build or reestablish trust, that new interim is going to have to admit where we are. There's going to have to be apologies, and there's going to have to be some intentional relationship building that will bridge those gaps between not just the schools and the communities, but the schools and everyone within the district. I know that is not going to fall on the interim, but that has to be first and foremost before any work is done, because as we see, and even in the recall efforts that people in the community are initiating, people are dissatisfied, they feel bamboozled, they feel deceived, and so many other things, rightfully so. I stand with the community in all of that. In order for us to understand the beauty and the value that still exists in MPS and the opportunities that exist through collective building, we have to understand that we are a significant, we meaning the district is a significant part of the problem. Before we go any further, that has to be established. And the new interim is going to have to be the one to say, like Director Jackson. I don't know what I don't know. I apologize for all of the harm and all of the deceit and everything else that has been done. This is going to be our plan moving forward. With that, a strong board is going to have to support that interim through new policies, through the analysis of the policies that exist to determine what's working and what isn't. There's going to have to be a lot of collective action, collective intentional work, and that is going to start with this interim. And the first thing is repairing the harm that has been done, because it's far and it's deep, and it's nothing that we should be turning a blind eye to. I'll stop there because I'm no longer on the board. So my remarks moving forward are speaking from an invested community, or I'll say constituent. And I'll kind of pass the torch to Director Jackson and Angela. But I would say we have to acknowledge where we are, and there has to be some real genuine apologies. And then we have to collectively identify what's working and what isn't. Until that happens, nothing is going to change about where we are and where we will go moving forward.
Thank you. Appreciate
I mean,
that.
can I just hop in real? Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to ask you, you and Director Jackson. Go ahead.
So yes to everything Aisha said, and also, like, I just want to throw this caveat in there. This person who is going to be the interim superintendent will likely end up being our superintendent. For the last 10 years, the person who served as interim superintendent was promoted to superintendent. So unless there is a major push from the community to be heavily involved, not only in finding an interim superintendent who, to Aisha's point, is willing to reconcile with the struggles that the district has, and not just want to pat themselves on the back, which is what we saw with this last administration, as well as demands that interim have to go through the process of becoming the superintendent and not just be appointed by the board. Like, this is another opportunity for us as a community to say, these are the things that we expect. This is what we want to happen with this process. The president of the board right now, Marva Herndon, before she was a board member, when she was a constituent during the time when Dr. Driver was pushed out, made several calls that the community be involved in the hiring of an interim superintendent. She made several calls about the lack of transparency through that process. And so I would implore Director Herndon, like all of us, need to email her and say, hey, this was your view when you were a constituent. Now, as a president, you seem to be comfortable with moving these meetings behind closed doors. You seem to be comfortable with not allowing community voice in the interim superintendent process. And so where did that switch come from? And who's pushing the buttons behind closed doors, telling you that this is how this process needs to happen?
Good. That's good. Thank you, Angela. Thank you. Director Jackson, would you like to comment on that same question?
Absolutely. So with this interim right now, it is only for a year. We as a board have agreed to whoever this person is will only serve a year, and we will do our search, nationwide search, for a permanent superintendent. So I know that was the culture of years ago of this person right now becoming a permanent, but no, that was all agreed upon that this person is only temporary. Yeah, big time. But in for him or her to take over this role, just initiation front, as Aisha said already, but even outside of just apologizing for where we are, because whoever take on this task will be under a microscope, it's just, it comes with the nature. But what I would say, is also with that understanding, I would love for a person to have a business background who can really talk to the people from that aspect as it relates to not just the money and how everything works, because it's a business institution first. And if we don't take all that into account, with this airplane, the education piece is great, but understanding how the money comes in, the different stakeholders, the business community, how they're involved, the philanthropic community, how they're involved, like a breakdown of all of these monies that comes in from these different organizations to get the whole big budget of where we are, that also needs to be explained as well. So if he can come in and she can come in and explain that too, that'd be great.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm going to stay with you, Director Jackson. Just a question that was in the chat. Earlier, you had mentioned that you had sought information, information that was, and I'm putting this in quotation marks, withheld, wasn't made available to you from the CFO, I believe you said. And let me pull this back up a little further again here. What is the expected responsiveness to board members from those entities that you sought information from? What are you all expecting them to give you, and then for you all to be able to report to the public?
Yeah, absolutely. So for one, information. So I was denied access to a lot of different departments out the gate, with just doing what I'm doing, asking questions and how can I help serve? What else could I provide you? But I wasn't given that opportunity. I was met with nothing but resistance. So for me, and of course, unfortunately, like Aisha, different departments like people will literally get called to the superintendent's office and be asked, what did you talk to him about? What did he say? Matter of fact, don't talk to him at all. So like these are the behind the scene battles that we have to endure. So when we able to find different things, it's not because they've given us the information, it's us doing our own research, finding, whoever we can to build relationships with. But the hardest part of being an elected official in this space is having access to information. And people think you automatically supposed to know this. I don't. Nobody does. I haven't been in this 20 years, nor have anybody else. So to be in a space where, you're newly elected and a little bit, but I don't know anything about the literacy department. I don't know anything about, whatever it may be, but I know about the money. And that's my biggest concern for us to keep this going, to avoid where we are right now, being a whole mess. So, and having the answers to give to the public, I have to have access to the different departments to have the conversation with me openly and not based out of fear, because that fear factor was real and still is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to go to another question that's in the chat. And then either of you can volunteer to start with this. Pastor Lanier, did you have a question?
You can go ahead. I just noticed that I think Aisha had her.
Oh,
you were looking at my hand. Yeah, it was a long time ago, but Aisha, I think.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Pastor.
You're good. She wanted to add on, I think, to his question. I think is what I saw.
Also, thank you for that. I want to quickly note too that there are other important factors to consider as we start to engage as a community and as a district in that superintendent search process. There are 4 seats that are up for re-election in April of 2025. That seat is my former seat, District 4. That is Director Chela Garcia, Director Jilly Gokul Gandhi, and Director Henry Leonard. I say that, and I really want people to understand that it does not just fall on the district, the responsibility in this search process. It also falls on the constituents of Wisconsin and those that are going to soon be knocking at our doors again, asking for our support in whatever capacity to help elect them to that board. In addition to that, whatever will happen, just thinking about the recall efforts, if that is successful, that is going to mean that there are going to be 4 or at least a couple individuals that are going to be facing a special election. That's very important, because if those individuals that are leading that initiative succeed, that then means that there's going to be a special election perhaps in November of this year that will ultimately disrupt this superintendent process. And so the onus does not just fall on the current board and the leaders that are within the district now. To Angela's point, there is going to have to be, continue to be the collective outrage of the community and the engagement in this process. One of the other things that people do not know is that any constituent in the city of Milwaukee at any given moment can write their elected official or send a policy draft to their elected official or any board member and request that that be considered for action on the board. This was, and to give credit to where it's due, a lot of things that I did during my time on the board was a call and response from the community to the board, to me as their elected official, and I adhered to that, or I honored that. That is a process that can occur now. If the community wants to be involved in that superintendent process, if the community wants for there to be a thorough screening with other candidates beyond this interim pool, the community has the capacity to make those demands. And when we show up in numbers, as we've done in the last month or so, they will listen. And so I just want to put that out there, that we as a community own this process. And if anything fails about it, or if we do not get any aspect of what we demand, in a sense, that's going to fall on us. I'll leave that there.
Thank you, Aisha. I appreciate that. Question from the chat, directed to any of the participants here. Is it safe to say that the collective efforts between the president / local officials and MPS board members needs to be more strategic? Okay, let's see, the question disappeared there. Let me go get it back up here. Is it safe to say that the collective efforts between the, I'm assuming this may be board president, local officials, and MPS board members needs to be more strategic and stronger to make sure the poverty area, low test score areas, environments are better, to ensure that students have more inspiration to be disciplined enough, it's jumping around, to be disciplined enough to come into the schools and give it their all? So generally, I think it's asking, is it important for local officials and board members to be more strategic and stronger in their areas, and particularly understanding around poverty, in order for our young people to have a greater inspiration to do well in school? Anyone can address that.
I don't want to take over because I know I like talking about this.
Go ahead, Aisha.
I'll say this. So one of the things that I submitted right before resigning was a proposal, and I know Darryl and I actually co-sponsored this proposal for a community accountability commission. And we were proposing that the Community Accountability Commission is made up of community stakeholders, representatives from the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee County, from a mental health entity or mental health community, from higher education, from the parent student community, from someone with an accounting or financial background. And the purpose for doing that is because we understood, and this is actually a reflection of Angela's advocacy as well, through Beck and Ari and many other community partners. We understood the importance of bridging that gap between the schools and the community. And we also understood that the distrust and mistrust was real. And so in order for us to have faith in how the $252 million referendum was spent, we understood that there needed to be a stronger connection and relationship between our city governmental agencies and our representatives in other stakeholder capacities within the community, as well as the MPS district. And so that is something that was kind of tabled or tucked away, but that is something that I would encourage the community and so many others to review, revise if necessary, and then submit for reconsideration, because it is important that we bridge those gaps between city officials, between parents, between the finance or the business partners in the community. And the only way to do that is through collective community action. But as we talk about strategy and as we talk about revitalizing or reviving our district, we have to understand that MPS cannot do it alone. And that has been part of the issue with the previous administration and even some current leaders within the district, as well as the union. It has been this safeguard of the MPS district where no one on the outside has been allowed in unless you have that personal relationship or affiliation through Greek or many other things that is very limiting. And so if we want to really revive and transform our district, we are going to have strategic direction and vision. And that is going to be more advantageous when certain individuals, key stakeholders beyond MPS is involved.
Thank you. I'll direct this next question to.
Can I jump in on that real quick, Bob?
Oh, sure. Sure, absolutely.
So I just want to say that through Beck and Arwe and Micah, which is our equity coalition, we are continuing to press for Director Carr's community accountability commission. That has been one of our consistent demands since this whole process. She brought it up, and since this whole process has started, we are hoping to continue to work with a few of the board members to hopefully get that on the table. And so I really would like for the community to be on the lookout for that. But also, I was shocked as a teacher, as well as a constituent, that there was not intergovernmental collaboration between the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee Public Schools. And I'm talking about the mayor's office and the Common Council and MPS, particularly because our county executive has the power to come in and take over our 4 lowest performing schools, right? And so you would think that they would want to be in collaboration with one another, but not only just that. When we look at what MPS produces, that is what ends up in our community. And so when we see high rates of car theft, right? The Kia boys, when we see all of this gun violence that is happening, a lot of that can be attributed to the lack of skills that our students are leaving Milwaukee Public Schools with. So our mayor and our county executive have a 100% buy-in to what is happening in Milwaukee Public Schools. So the fact that they don't collaborate with one another is yet another failure of our city, right? Because when we don't, we see what happens when we don't hold in Milwaukee Public Schools accountable, then a bunch of things can really happen that not only affect us, but it affect the entire state. So in my opinion, it would behoove the mayor, the county executive, chairwoman Marcia Nicholson to all work together collaboratively to ensure that Milwaukee Public Schools is putting out the best product.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you.
Derek,
Let's see.
In for a minute.
I'm sorry.
I just want to read a comment in the chat because it was connected to what Angela said. I just want to read it directly. And she says to be clear, that proposal was a result of the consistent advocacy of your organization, of Black Educators Caucus, the amazing leaders of ARWE, Micah, and many others. Not another Director Carr initiative, but another community initiative that Director Carr and Director Jackson submitted and proposed. I also just want to put this out here. It doesn't need to be answered right now. There may be another question, but somebody asked the question, what is the best place to find or create a community agenda for MPS? In other words, is there a place where a community agenda exists and is being cultivated? And if not, where is the place to cultivate an agenda, community agenda for MPS?
So I'm just going to say, for me personally, in terms of the work that I have been doing, Beck, Micah, Arwe, and Lit as well, back in 2017, all decided to come together and create an equity coalition. We found that we were all showing up at the same school board meetings, testifying about the same things. And I'm a firm believer that many hands make for light work. And so we felt like it would be imperative for us to work together. And so all of our social media presence will display whatever the current calls to action might be, whatever our current demands are. We meet with one another and we discuss like what is happening within Milwaukee Public Schools and the things that we want to work on, specifically as it relates to equity, which is everything in the district. So that is a place where you can get started. But like, our call has always been for folks to show up at school board meetings, because I don't know if y'all noticed, when everything was happening with Superintendent Posey, those board meetings were packed. People were showing up. Like, people were upset and enraged about everything that was happening. But now that has kind of passed and we are getting into the process of now we have to find an interim superintendent, and we have kind of gotten to the end of the budget discussion, and there's no more really big news as it relates to DPI. The board meetings have been dry. It'll be myself and maybe 5 or 6 other people in the boardroom. And when you begin to come to school board meetings, you start to hear things that the board is talking about, and that helps you build a platform of things that you want the board to continue to work on. And you don't have to actually show up at the school board meetings either. They're streamed on YouTube, right? So we just need more folks to tap into that space, is I guess what my point is right now, is that it has to really begin to be a area where the community begins to show up and center their voice and their needs. So like, you could follow Equity Coalition's platform, but I'm not mad at there being 27,000 platforms being presented to these board members on a regular basis. Like, make their jobs more difficult. I feel like their jobs are far too easy right now. Every time you come to a board meeting, you see an agenda item presented, they discuss it for a few minutes, and then boom, it's passed, right? And we want to have more robust dialogue and discussions where the community is involved and the community is having a say.
That's good. Thank you, Angela. Let me add a question that's not in the chat. Aisha, back in 2021, and this question is for all of you, but it's just a note that back in 2021, in your campaign, you had the only, to my knowledge, in the history of Milwaukee Public Schools, or at least in the past 30 years that I know of, the only youth-led and managed school board campaign in the history of any of those board elections. Young people, teenagers, were heavily involved. How important will it be to involve, because we're talking a lot of grown folk stuff here and a lot of adults and what adults need to be doing, but we've had some young people with a voice. And I'm speaking about even particularly some of the least of these, because we have a lot of young people at Grappy, Asada, North Division, Vincent, young people with a different type of intelligence, knowledge, understanding of their reality, who have a voice and can add to this. How important is it to include some of those babies in all of this?
Yeah, so I love when that question comes up, because I like to remind people, or for those who don't know, inform people that I don't know that I would have won my election if it weren't for the youth that showed up and showed out. And I think that's very important, even as we think about our history of the civil rights movement, before and even thereafter. Like, youth really are the most powerful stakeholders, I would argue, in the entire universe. And when they show up and they show out, things happen. And so I would say it's very important, as we think about who we're serving and the importance and the complexities and the opportunities that exist, we have to prioritize the youth. Because they are the greatest beneficiaries. If we fail in any capacity, whether it be an elected capacity, a classroom teaching capacity, district-wide leadership capacity, they will feel it the most. And I took this from Angela, because I was not at first aware of this proverb, but Angela, jump in and help me out. But it's if the children do not feel the warmth of the village, they will burn it. Burn it down to feel its warmth. And I think that's actually what we're seeing in the city of Milwaukee. But that also is why it was very important for me as an educator at that time to engage and involve them in the process. They have a voice, they matter. And if we do not create a space for them to lead and to be heard, and understanding that they are the greatest stakeholders, they are the most innovative, they are the greatest beneficiaries, it's their children or future children that will benefit from what we do or we don't do. We have to understand that they have to be a part of this process. If we don't include them, as we have not been doing so, We will continue to see the youth pain-based gangs increase. We will continue to see the reckless driving. We will continue to be talking about the same things. And as we all know, or I would hope we all know, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. But we have to create a place for them. You can't talk about education. You can't talk about school. You can't talk about youth. You can't talk about the development of youth, mental health, disparities, none of that without engaging them and without involving them in those discussions, and also the policies and the practices moving forward. And so that is one of the proudest moments that I've ever had in my entire life. And even as I see those who are leading the recall effort, these are youth that are out doing this work. These are youth that are just like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I want different leadership because I'm tired of going to my school and walking through hallways that resemble prisons. I'm sick and tired of going through my or going to school, depending on my only meal for the day and eating molded food or inedible food or whatever. But we have to include them. And I think that is that was a modeled level of leadership that I hope more people pay attention to, because it wasn't Aisha that won that. It was the Zions, it was the Mia Moores, it was the Elijahs, it was the Tati Annas, the Latron Whites, God rest his soul. It were all of them. It was all of them that stood up and said, you know what? You are going to work for us, and we're going to lead this charge. We're going to make our demands. We're going to make them clear. But at the end of the day, we want for this, that, and the other. And they moved on that. And I would like to say that I honored their request, and that I represented them to the best of my ability. But we have to make more room for them. I think about some of the early on proposals, and I don't want to continue because, I can go on and on about this. But I think about like when I proposed funding the first budget cycle during 2021, it was air conditioning. That was a result of Mia Moore, Charlotte Moore, who's now a new alderwoman, and Reggie Moore, who does work, I think, with the city, the Office of Violence Prevention of 414 Life. That was their daughter who wrote that proposal and submitted it to me. When I think about my time on the campaign trail, Zion Rogers wrote my speaking points and held meetings with Elijah Johnson, who was the field operations leader. They created those plans, and I sat there and I engaged with them and I listened, and then we acted on it collectively. And things were done, and they were done right. And so we have to make more room for the youth. We can't keep talking about them and speaking at them and dancing around them and not engaging with them, because ultimately they are the greatest beneficiaries. And if we fail them or we fail in these capacities, we see what's going to happen. And so it's important that even as we think about board governance moving forward and the next superintendent, that is a critical question that they should be asked. What are you going to do to possibly expand this board so that youth can be a part of this process, so that students can be a part of this process, and not from the schools that we all love to brag about, not just the Reagans or the Golden My Ears where my daughter attends, but the Transitions and the Groppies and the Novas and the Milwaukee Youth Education Center, because they matter. They matter just as much as the others. And so that is going to be a push. I'm excited to work with Director Jackson and my predecessor on that. And I encourage the community to show up and keep pushing that as well, because our children need a space. Our children need seats at the table. And if we don't give them seats, we already know what they're going to do.
Thank you,
If I
Aisha.
add to that, in addition to that, as we move with just different board members coming in and out, there hasn't been a real succession plan or blueprint that's already in motion. So I hate that we always have to create this new wheel anytime we enter the space. So for me, what I'm planning on doing is leaving something, so whoever comes behind me can just add to what's already in motion, instead of creating this wheel all over again. Because that's difficult. Your time is limited. You only have 4 years, if that. So this is why things don't get done, because different people, so many have their own different agenda. own motives. So if the board can work collectively as one, that would be ideal. But unfortunately, you have egos, and we forget the human element in people that takes over. The ego, the power tripping, the I need to be in control. So to see the vision for the district at large, most don't. It's only it's only a few. It really is. So personalities don't even match on the board. Understanding the background. So my biggest issue was white fragility. I never had to work with white women to this capacity who think they know our Black children better than us. That was difficult for me to understand. That's challenging, even still. With a district that's comprised of what? Close to 70,000 students and 70% that look like me? Come on now. You can't tell me, you know, my kids, you know, better than me. And as far as just passing on information, I don't believe in passing a torch. I believe in lighting others, because I still have a wealth of knowledge and information. But if I could light somebody else's, absolutely. Because I know my time and my experience or my knowledge would only reach a certain audience. So let me reach to the youth who do have that audience who I can't reach, but I can reach one who has the same vision. Hey, as long as the message is received. But I believe in lighting other people's torches, because we still, as you, Baba, and Mr. Lanier, there's so much wealth inside of you. Don't just pass it and give it away like mine, so I can be the next trendsetter for my generation and so on and so forth. So no, I light everybody else's torches. I'm keeping my information because I know there's still so much fire in me to do so much work.
Thank you, Darryl. Thank you, appreciate it. I want to hit this one question. I think Pastor Lanier had put it in the chat, and it's in regards to an equity coalition. Maybe that was mentioned earlier, and I didn't, and I may have missed it. And I don't know if this is for Angela. It says, "What are the priorities, in short, of the equity coalition?" Was that her? Or was that a?
That was Angela.
That's Angela. Okay.
Certainly. So I did share the link with Pastor Lanier of our current demands, but I can just read them to you all really quickly. So our initial demand was the immediate removal of Superintendent Posley, but now we are asking for an immediate review of his administrative leadership team. That includes qualifications for their current role, current credentials, and experience related to the current positions that they hold with proven outcomes. And so that would be Jennifer Mims Howell, who is his chief academic officer, Paulette Chambers, who is the chief of staff, and Adria D. Matalini, who is the chief human resources officer. Our second demand is to establish a community coalition to assist in the hiring process of the new superintendent, with the understanding that any potential candidates have a track record of continuous improvement and systemic change. To change administrative policy to create a performance evaluation tool for the superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools that includes feedback from staff, students, and community, with a public report summarizing the performance of the superintendent. To conduct an equity audit conducted by an external auditor who has demonstrated experience in supporting large education systems, which have been miseducating, neglecting, and criminalizing Black, Brown, and Indigenous students since June 19, 1865. This outside equity audit will include recommendations on district structural reorganization and changes to funding distribution across all parts of the district. These results will be published publicly and shared with the Community Oversight Committee. Improve the funding formula at the school level to move from pupil-based allocation to equity-based allocation in the FY 24-25 school year and school years following, meaning the schools that have the highest needs, highest special education population, highest English language learner population receive the budget allocation to meet those needs, and then to change board policy to eliminate the oppressive board governance structure of Robert's Rules of Order, and in its place, a consensus-based model that truly allows for community input and feedback through quantitative and qualitative measures.
Thank you, Angela. Excellent.
We'll get that and send that out too.
That is a radical agenda, and that's very much in the tradition of a lot of the powerful and very, I'll use the term, liberatory educational movements that go back 50 some years in the city, if not more. And that's some of the tradition that I'm just, just elated, and it blesses my heart to see that we have educators here, that you all here speaking today, that are channeling that power, and they're channeling it, they're moving it forward, and they're taking it to another level. So this is just beautiful to hear. We have 10 minutes left, and Pastor, I'm going to ask for your recommendations as to the direction that we may want to go next, just in case you wanted to do some wrapping up type pieces.
My recommendation is is that you give each one of these loquacious speakers
Yes.
2 minutes to talk about that. What are and recognizing that we're going to have another one of these in the future, but what are the one or two key critical things you think we need to be thinking about next as we move forward on the education journey? That's my recommendation.
Good. So 2 minutes, our prolific and loquacious speakers, and we'll start with Angela.
Certainly. So it is about to be a very quiet time. July, there are no board meetings. We could potentially see, though, a special board meeting called as we get ready to go into the process of finding an interim superintendent. I'm likely that there will be a special board meeting in July. So I need folks to pay attention. Beck is going to be releasing a press release on Monday about our demands around the new interim superintendent, as well as the process. We are also going to be releasing a community survey to get feedback from the community on what they would like to see in the superintendent, that we also are going to be sharing with the members and district administration. And then we get back into busy season, right, in August and September. And so we need folks, like I said, my call to action is for you all to tap into these school board meetings, to show up and to support us, and to support our students. We need more folks in those school board meetings that look like us, and less green shirts. So I will say this as a person who is a member of the union, because we do have 6,000 members that we can collectively call upon when they want to pack those board meetings for the things that they want. They pack those board meetings, and we need to show the same force for our students and for our community. So when there is a call to action to black out the board or to merely just show up, we need folks in those seats. You don't have to provide testimony. You don't have to do anything but be there and merely show the board that we are going to continue to show up for our students. So this anger, this sense of urgency that we feel right now, let that be the fuel to our fire. Do not let this urgency die. And please, you all, if you have not signed a petition for the recall, and I know Aisha's going to talk about it, but if you have not, please do so. We need support in all areas if we want to create that structural and systemic change that our students, particularly Black students, need in Milwaukee to thrive. And then the last thing that I want to mention is we have a really big legislative policy that is going to go into effect next year with Act 20. And the district has not created a plan around how they are going to support teachers and students to make sure that we are adhering to this legislative policy. So that is another area where you will hear the Equity Coalition begin to push the district to ensure that we aren't just talking about improving reading scores and improving students' academic outcomes, but that they're actually putting their money where their mouth is and funding the things that we need in order to be able to do that work.
Thank you, Angela. Director Jackson.
Yes, sir. Just one for me, and that's the biggest one. I love the women because they come out, they support, they're consistent, they're knowledgeable, and they're quick to just ready to go. My biggest and probably the issue, and I've been saying this for quite some time before even in this space, more men need to show up and be consistent. They really do. Like, Black male leadership is needed desperately in this space of education and just even in our communities, because it's a marriage, right? So if all we keep seeing is the women showing up, that's the same thing in a household. is broken. No, we need the other side of the coin to show up and fight just as well. So our boys as well as our girls see this is how we work. This is the union between the man and the woman in our community, like we would see in a household, a marriage. So more men need to show up, be consistent, and not just show up for not just show up when things are now dire or when it's now beneficial for me. Because these women, especially, excuse me, I'm just going, Angela, she's been there when there was just 2 or 3 people in the audience, 2 or 3, but she's always been consistent every time. So now to see the pockets of different faces of people, especially the new faces of men, be consistent. Don't just jump on this bandwagon now because it's now gaining this notoriety, this attention, but men need to be there. I'm holding every man accountable to show up. It's too many cowards in this space who know information and don't do nothing and just sit on it. But yet the women out here putting their life on the line, putting their reputation on the line, their character on the line. No, men need to show the hell up. And that's my only issue. And if we can do more of that, a lot of this will change instantly. But they need to see us together in unison.
That's solid, D. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Aisha, you had a last statement. We've got 2 minutes here. Thank you.
So first I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I know we have a presidential debate coming up. There are so many other things. I think there's a board meeting tonight. Is there? I'm out of that world right now.
You are correct.
Okay.
Actually, I think it's over because we weren't there to disrupt anything. So I'm sure they banged it out real quick.
But you know what though, I want to kind of push back a little bit, because one of the most frustrating, disheartening things that I experienced as a former school board director was being in a space and not being able to really help my people. I entered that role with the understanding, and I know there now that there was some delusion, but I entered that space thinking that I was going to be the one that invite the community in, and engage with the community in such a way, and the community was going to transform the district. And it's not to say that I have given up on that. I just realized that the fight is different. And so I hear Angela when she say, be present for those board meetings. I also understand that a lot of people can't make it to the board meetings. I also have understood through my lived experiences on the side of the audience, being a teacher for almost 7 years and being on the board for 3 years, that a lot of times you sit there and you submit written testimonies and you advocate and you shout out certain things and it falls on deaf ears and you feel like no one is listening. And so what I can appreciate now is that the community has stepped up and said enough is enough. And with that, I would challenge everyone, if you are not going to be in the board meetings, make sure you're out here engaging with the audience. And that includes educating people. One of the things that I am proud to say that I did do during my time was take board meetings to homes and to community organizations and to restaurants, happy hours, whatever, like wherever the people were. I attempted to take all of the information there and educate people because they weren't coming to those spaces. But now we are at a very critical yet opportune time where we have an opportunity to flip the board and to get leaders on the board who represent us in the best capacity. And sometimes that's not always achieved by sitting in that audience. It is time to stand up and stand on business, as the kids say. There are recall efforts going, but even beyond that, we have a state legislation that, as we know, inequitably funds our public educational system. I like to say that the state of Wisconsin wants Milwaukee rhythm, but not our blues. And as we can see, living in the community, the blues is taking a toll on a lot of us. I know yesterday I was going to pick up a donation and I'm on the south side driving past Oklahoma and the shooting occurred. And those were 2 children and 2 young adults. And this has been a reoccurring cycle in our city. I've learned also that it's not enough to just point the finger and blame our elected officials, because being a former elected official and being on the receiving end of the union, I understand the fear and the danger of bucking against the system or poking, or in my case, I would say stabbing the beast. But someone has to do it. And when our elected leaders, and not just elected leaders, our organizational leaders see that the community is active and they're engaged and they're visible and they're consistent, a lot of times that gives our leaders permission to go above and beyond and do that dangerous or that critical and that courageous work. And that's all it takes. The power lies in every attendee in this Zoom, those that are going to watch it later on, those that did not make the time or do not know that this exists or this opportunity occurred. But the power lies with you all. And the changes that you all want to see, a lot of times it's not going to happen in that boardroom. A lot of times it's going to happen in the streets. And I just encourage everybody to step up in whatever capacity you can and move for that collective action, because now is the time. We have seen the outrage. We heard the cries. There's many clips now on social media that shows the people showing up to the board meetings and speaking in such a way and acting in such a way. And that is not anything to be dismissed. People are tired. People feel it, not just through rent increases or tax increases, but in so many other ways. I'm reminded of Angela's struggle when she was teaching at MLK, and I know how she loved her babies, and I know how she loved her families, but to have to endure what she did, that is a constant reality. And I know we're over time, but I just want to encourage everybody, no matter what odds are stacked against us, no matter how dangerous it may be, get your spirit right and focus on the righteous work and always put God first, because through that and with us collectively, there's power in numbers and we can get this done. And God's only going to give us a certain amount of time. And now is the time. So let's step up from wherever you are, and I'm going to shut up. Thank you.
That's good, Aisha. That is a outstanding close. Appreciate this. I'm gonna be turning it over to Pastor Lanier now, but I just want to take the administrative prerogative to be able to say I'm very proud of these individuals and what they're doing. So, Pastor.
Yeah, thank you. Phenomenal work, and amen to everybody. And it was an excellent close. Aisha, let us continue to press on with purpose, all of us. You know, if you look, as you look at this screen, there's an abundance of Black brilliance and experience and dynamism here. And together we're tough to beat together. And so that's why we're so divided with intentionality. I'm not going to preach. Sister Carr already did. So I'm going to try to practice some restraint, but just echo that same sentiment. Really difficult to beat us when we're on the same page, moving together in lockstep is really, really tough. And not only beat us, but we also need to be in a position of leadership to move this city forward. That's the other burden. We have to advocate and lead. So it's one thing is to call folks out, which we absolutely need to do. We need to call them out and be at a disposition to lead right after that and move into leadership. And so thank you all for joining us. This is great. Appreciate the 4 call outs. Appreciate all of Angela's call outs. Brother Jackson, your call out to the men on point, receive. We were talking about that when we opened the meeting about you can't be excellent without accountability. We can't be excellent without iron sharpening iron. It just doesn't happen. If we're not calling one another in and holding one another accountable, we'll never, ever, ever be great. So thank you, everybody here, for your passionate call-ins and calling us all to accountability. And I believe, like everybody else on here, I'm just saying what's already been said. When we stand on business together, business will get done for this city. Thank you for joining us, Group Black Men Organizing, connecting. We're not outnumbered. We are out organized. But as we organize, then we'll be handling business and we'll move forward. Stay tuned for additional information from us. You will get email from us with the content from this session, content in the chat, the documents, the links, the PowerPoint, and we'll continue to press on. Thank you. God bless. Peace and power to you all.